You know this channel is a gun channel. It's supposed to be a gun channel, but I don't get any emails about guns. Although I think I've made all my Second Amendment points on this channel, it would just be me reiterating things I've already said about how stupid a lot of these gun control laws are, how redundant they are, uh, especially in New Jersey, because uh, Governor Murray wants to turn New Jersey into California. But to everybody else, I was asked the question by what appears to be a white man: what is white privilege? Now, this could be somebody trolling, or it could be, a legitimate question. Or back to the trolling, it could be somebody who thinks that I'm going to respond with a stupid answer, which is typically what I see a lot of white folks who are intellectually dishonest love to straw man. It's like, anytime they want to have a discussion about race, it's like, oh, find the dumbest nigger in the room and then get them to talk about race and then wait for the moment for them to say something profoundly stupid and then pounce on it and then say, see, this is what they're talking about, right? And clearly that's not what they're talking about. Or clearly I should say, that is what they're talking about, but that's not what the issue is, because there are some black people who really don't fully understand the issue or even know how to articulate the issue themselves. Or you have those black people who desperately want white approval, and they'll do anything to get white approval by throwing other black people underneath the bus. And white people are usually standing there on the sidelines ready to reward them, and then, while they're, accepting all these rewards, and, typically that's financial support, better jobs, better opportunities, whatever, that black person who will spout the, accountability rhetoric, right? The personal responsibility rhetoric, uh, that black person will, be in a better position than other black people. And then they'll say, that they got there through their, their own hard work and whatnot. And you see this time and time again, from Sheriff Clark, to pretty much every black person that ever steps on Fox News. There's that. That's why black people jump up and always call those black people coons. There's a way of criticizing black people without being intellectually dishonest and omitting the aspects of white supremacy that have negatively affected the black community, that contribute and create many of the problems that currently exist in the black community. White people love to wash their hands of the current state of the black community. You know, and you see the hypocrisy uh, everywhere. You know, the hypocrisy primary example. When it comes to these white kids shooting up the schools. They want to, analyze, oh, he was picked on. Oh, he was, he had, a poor childhood or something like that. That's why he's fucked up. Right. And then what we're learning is with the incels, it's basically a bunch of young white men. And I got an incel video coming. I haven't posted it yet. It's basically a bunch of, young adolescent white males that they're confused about masculinity, and they got like autistic spectrum disorder and don't know how to attract women, and they set off creep alarms, and basically they're just mad that they can't get the pussy. Has nothing to do with the idea that, oh, they were bullied to death. No, they just can't get the pussy of the girl that they want to get with, right? So there's all sorts of compassion dished out when it comes to white criminals. You see this with the coded language of, anytime, black criminals are referred to, they're referred to as thugs. Anytime white criminals are referred to, they're typically referred to as punks, right? Or black people are referred to as, animals or subhuman something. I mean, this was the whole issue behind Donald Trump calling MS-13 animals. That's literally white people coded language, because basically anybody who isn't white who engages in criminal behavior is subhuman and an animal. But when it comes to other white people, they're just bad white people. We saw the same thing with the World War II and the Germans versus the Japanese. The Germans were depicted as just simply bad white people, but they were still white people. When it came to the Japanese, the Japanese were, a subhuman division, of you know, of mankind. And they would draw pictures of them with bat wings and fangs, and you could go on, you can go online and pull up old anti-Japanese U.S. war posters, and that's the way that they were depicted. White privilege is the ability to set the tone, set the pace, set the standards, and establish the value system that everybody else has to adhere to, which essentially um, always puts white people first. It's just what it does. And as I said before, the problem with nations like America is what America is selling is not what it is. America sells multiculturalism. America sells, we're all one, everybody come together, kumbaya, right? But that's not what it actually is. What it actually is a system of white supremacy where white people will always be first and always be in the driver's seat. Now, some people will say, well, white people make up the majority of this country. Well, don't you think that they should be, in the driver's seat, at all times, because it's a majority white country. This country was founded on, or for, white people, moving past all the obvious arguments of land taken, rape and pillage and conquering and all that other stuff, right? It's for white people, right? And I agree with that, right? America was built for white people. The only problem is again, it's not what you're selling. What it is not what you're selling. And you run into problems with that. I mean, it's the same way that black people run into problems. Like it's like how white people get them, black people who, um, like it's funny because, as I'm making this video, I watched the video of black women leaving the U.S. and they went down to like Costa Rica. I'm pretty sure everybody's seen that video, right? It's been circulating around on YouTube, and it was black women, and they went to Costa Rica because they were basically sick of white people, and they were feeling some type of way about, Donald Trump and the atmosphere, and the way that, basically a lot of white people are just showing their ass. I personally do believe that Donald Trump was the response, to Barack Obama. And despite Barack Obama being, 50% Caucasian, white people were, talking about him like he was, Idi Amin. He's the blackest man in the world, and his whole goal and purpose in life was to exterminate white people. I mean, yeah, I've had so many friends that I've had to just disassociate from because of, the type of rhetoric that they would say about, Barack Obama. And I would sit there and I would look at them with a side eye. And one of the things that the woman said in the video, I had to I had to agree with. Black people know white people better than white people know themselves. Call it a adaptation, from, black people passing down certain knowledge or awareness or double consciousness about white people and what they say a lot of white people don't recognize the certain things that they say. Um, and this is why you end up with, Roseanne and, her reference towards black people is apes, and, she doesn't really see the problem with it. Like, it's like there's no double consciousness when it comes to the vast majority of white Americans. They just spew shit, and they just like don't they want to pretend like they don't get it, or you have those who don't get it. I don't know which one it is, but I'm saying black people can pick up on, those sort of microaggressions, especially when it has a lot of historical context to it, calling black people apes, referring to black men as boy, you know, um, saying things like those people or urban, like it's all coded language. It's all dog whistles, to white people. And black people know white people's dog whistles. I mean, we know, white people in Boston call black people Mondays. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all type of stuff. We know, white people run around and say, anytime they just cruise around the internet. Anytime there's a black person engaged in criminal activity on a YouTube video, they love to type he didn't do nothing. But then on the videos where it's white criminality, they're completely absent, right? Then when it comes to the percentage of black people committing crimes relative to the percentage of white people committing crimes, they always want to exclude the socioeconomic disparities and differences between the two groups. Of course, you're going to have more black people commit crime if black people, generationally since the end of slavery, have always been disproportionately poor relative to white people. But that doesn't ever come into the room. They just jump up and say, "Oh, it's black culture. It's black culture." Right? Ignoring the fact that the culture, the thug culture that currently exists now, is a culture that was created by white people thanks to them dumping drugs into the black community. Not to mention the proliferation of gangster rap and gangster music, which is not, controlled by black people. The record labels, when hip hop first hit the scene, those were white record labels that were up there, putting it on. This is where the white people jump up and say, "It's the Jews, it's the Jews, they were Jewish. The Jewish people run shit." Like, there's no white people participating in it. With Jewish people only being about, I think they're like 4% of the U.S. population. I might be wrong, but I think their population is about that of Indians, right? There's more Jewish people in the U.S. than there are in Israel. Um, but you know, I mean, there's just a lot of things that, like, example, going back to the video, what those black women had to say. Now, I understood the woman's sentiment when she brought up the point about, you know, white people have done enough damage, right? And then she said, they need to not have passports and fly around the world. I understood where she was coming from. I feel like that's a bit much. Like, really, like they shouldn't have passports and be able to travel and whatnot. And then the other problem is when you're talking in generalities like that, people are going to jump up and say, "Oh, that you're stating all, white people are like this, or all black people are like this," and then they're going to pounce on that. That's why I like to use the word at the or the phrase at the collective level. So when I talk about white supremacy, I talk about white supremacy at the collective level. That way, it gives enough wiggle room to say, I'm not talking about, white people, all white people, but what I am talking about is I'm talking about white people as a collective, meaning whether you participate in it or not, it doesn't matter that the system of racism and white supremacy in America is as such where white people are going to, uh, benefit. Now, personally, my belief is that classism comes before racism. And what the white elites do, which is a different class of white people, what the white elites do is they, basically keep poor and working class whites in check by fear mongering with the blacks and what the black people are doing, and trying to make poor working class whites vanguards for the white race. And they gladly go out there, doing the Dylon Roof thing, or go out there and trying to keep black people at bay and all that other stuff, thinking that they're doing the good work for, white society as a whole. And that's the whole trick. It's to get people to participate in something that really doesn't benefit them. They should be joining forces with the people that are similar, to, their situation. But the problem is, um, um, once you put it in somebody's mind, that they are superior than somebody else, they're not going to want to affiliate or associate with the group or the people who they feel that they are superior to. It's a very effective Jedi mind trick, right? And that's how I believe, the poor working class whites are duped and suckered. You can't tell them that. They'll argue you down. It's a race war, blacks versus whites, and that's just what it is, right? Um, but in terms of sentiments, I do understand the black people who are just sick and tired of white folks, and they're sick and tired of this system. White folks will jump up and say, well, why don't the black people just leave and go back to Africa? Well, main reason is because black people have invested entirely too much in this country, and they've shed too much blood in this country. Um, so unless white people are going to start talking, reparations, like black people really ain't going anywhere. They're not. They're just not. They really do, and again, there's like this love hate relationship, with America. I mean, the fact is that, black people were stripped from, their homeland, and then we've been out of, Africa for what, 400 or 500 years. Don't speak the language, know nothing of the culture. Our culture is American. Like, that's our culture. The same way with white people in America, their culture is American at this point. You can say you're a German American, but if I dropped you off in Germany, like, you wouldn't know what the fuck to do. You wouldn't be like, I'm home. Right? If I dropped you off in the UK, you wouldn't be like, I'm home, tea time. Like, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to be like, this is weird. I just want a baseball glove and a hot dog and, to be able to exercise my Second Amendment rights that basically don't even exist anywhere in European countries. Again, going back to my point about the white elites wanting to control the masses and keep the proletariat at bay. I mean, that's what that whole classism of you know white people internally, they're in their own internal conflicts within themselves. That is basically what their whole Revolutionary War was about. The crown, the queen, the white elites, right? I mean, anytime you see these, type of wars, whether it's Mel Gibson's The Patriots or whatnot, and you see, they show the representation of the redcoats and, these British commanders, and the level of disdain, like, that they speak of the colonists with, the level of just looking down their noses at the colonists, and it's like, everybody can see that. All the white people can see that when they want to talk about the British and how pretentious they are or were, but they don't seem to be able to see that with American corporate white capitalists. It, like, totally goes, over their head. And then to even, create even more of an illusion, what these, white corporate capitalists have done, who are basically the new nobles, because the nobles got rid of the monarchies and the nobles became the businessmen, and then you continue to be the white poor working class proletariat, right? Once they got a control, of the banking system, and the businesses, were in bed with the banking system. I know people want to come up with their Zionist Rothschild conspiracy theories and whatnot, but again, there's enough white elites at the top of the food chain that, even before, you want to argue that the Jews, have come into the room and, they've done this and done that with the banking system and everything else. Again, there were still white elites in Europe that wanted to control the proletariat well before the Jews, came in and took over, with, the banking system or whatever other, elders of Zion type of rhetoric you want to come with. Okay. Um, but where was I? I was talking about the sentiments, the sentiments. Oh, it's like what she was saying in that video, about just being sick and tired of white folks, the microaggressions, the passive aggressiveness. I've already stated before, white people feel like they're losing this country. Their birth rates are in the shitter. Their birth rates in the trash can. That's why they want to do all this gerrymandering and, change the voting laws and whatnot. Because, in 50 to 100 years, white people are going to be outvoted in this country. And so it would behoove them to, come with a different approach that is more inclusive, but they're not going to do that because the fear is losing power. And I totally get it. And that fear of losing power, notice the term that I use, or the phrase that I use, losing power. But yet you got white people running around talking about white privilege doesn't exist. How can you fear losing power but yet not have and possess privilege? How do you have the fear of losing something that you're claiming that you don't even have? It makes no sense. But so the fact that that fear is there in and of itself proves to you that there is a white privilege. And that white privilege is, all the various ways in which white people maintain power in America, which is again why they're doing everything in their power, to try to make sure that they don't lose that power. And that was actually pretty profound of me because I just came up with that off the top of my head and realizing that and trying to express my thoughts about, you know, this issue. Um, but it's like even watching that video, like I have my own issues with certain black people, like when it comes to, their fight against the system of white supremacy and, racism and all that stuff, right? Because it's like, okay, I get you on, white supremacy is a problem, the way that white people always have to define things, the way that, I mean, perfect example is like Jay-Z when he bought Cristal, and the French people, they came out and they basically said that, we didn't want our, champagne to be, spilled all over the place by these black rappers. Again, black people are associated with poverty. Cristal is associated with prestige, and having black people, just running around with Cristal, putting those images out there through hip hop, really ruffled, the owners of Cristal the wrong way, right? And again, that's another angle of white privilege where white, people get to define, what is status, what defines, what it, that the things that wealthy people do. And you see this all the time with black people running around trying to imitate wealthy whites and what they do, buying expensive cars, but yet Africans don't manufacture any luxury cars on the face of this planet, right? I mean, and we can talk about the reasons that is the neo-colonialism, the way that, black, that Africa has been basically forcibly held back and regressed so that European powers and other powers, be them Arabs or Asians, can basically come into Africa and get the minerals and resources for cheap. Africa is one of the largest land masses on the planet. And here you have all these Africans that are, poor, impoverished, no education, right? So, with these other superpowers around the world, it's very easy for them to go in and to manipulate the people and manipulate the environment and create conflicts, and then to go in there and get the raw, resources and materials. It's very easy for them to do that. As I've stated numerous times before, you get these white people that talk about all the Africans, they're killing each other and they can't govern themselves, right? And you got Boko Haram running around, Al Shabaab running around, and you got um, what else is there? Um, you got all these terrorist groups or coup organizations running around overthrowing governments, civil war breaks out, right? And I asked the question, I'm like, where are they getting the weapons from? Africans don't manufacture their own AK-47s, nor do they manufacture their own ammunition to shoot each other with. So where are they getting it from? Who's supplying it? Right? You got starving Africans all over the place. They can't even get food, but they can get an AK-47, right? You can get the AK-47s in there, but nobody can get any food in there, right? We've all seen the babies with the flies crawling all over their face and everything. Oh man, but they got them Russian AK-47s, right? They got them RPGs and them tanks, right? It's like I'm like, I mean, since Africans don't manufacture their own ammunition, it's like you're looking at Boko Haram like, shouldn't they have ran out of ammo yet? But no. So who's the Nicolas Cage guy going into Africa, walking around, handing stuff over? They've already done videos on this. Like the evidence is already there. Okay. There's a guy who wrote a book about it. They call them the what was the name? What was the economic hitmen, right? They already did the video on the economic hitmen, how to go in there. Okay, we want this. If you don't give it to us, we'll send in the jackals. The jackals go in and usually try to assassinate some leader, you know. So, and then that, creates, issues. The U.S. has been doing all type of international espionage like that forever, forever. I mean, technically speaking, Russia is right to say what it says about, the fact that, so what if we fucked with your elections? At the end of the day, you've been going around fucking with, other nations' elections and leaders and, democracies all around the world. You've been doing that forever so that it serves Western interest. It serves American interests. UK, EU, all that has been doing that as well too. And Russia's like, the asshole in the room that, wants to do its own thing. Actually, I shouldn't even call Russia the asshole in the room, but, they're like, well, we're doing our own thing over there. And I'm not saying Russia's perfect. Russia's got its own, totalitarian dictatorship, because that's really what Russia is. It's a totalitarian dictatorship. It's not a democracy. It's not a republic. It's none of that shit. It's literally Vladimir Putin. Ha I've won again. Surprise, surprise, right? Like, I mean, that's how a lot of the world operates. It's not America. America is very unique, in that aspect, which is what, you know, from a concept makes America a beautiful thing, right? And I think that most people want America to be, a better place and a more beautiful thing. But, America really struggles to get past its racist past. And it's not black people. It's not black people got the issue with racism. No, it's the people in power. It's white people. White people have the power to stop racism. They're just not going to do it because it's not in their collective best interest to do so, or so they think. Right? Aside from the fact that, ending racism, going back to the whole, what I've said about, Martin Luther King and where he was taking things before he got assassinated, he was going to talk about the economics. Integrating, or excuse me, because we didn't integrate, we desegregated. There's a difference between integration and desegregation. We desegregated. That's all we did socially. But we did not integrate economically. And again, they'll let a black leader go up there and start talking about Jesus and start talking about holding hands and coming together and all. As soon as you start talking about the money, oh, nigga, you got to go. Soon as you start talking about the money, and I've said this numerous times in other videos, I'm like, white men already know. I'm like, and most white men, they back off when if we're having conversations in person, they back off so quick as soon as I get into the money. As soon as I get into the money, they stop being stupid and stop being intellectually dishonest, because they can't. Like, the one thing I will say I respect about white men is white men don't fuck around when it comes to money. And as soon as you bring up the money issue, they're like, okay, I can't bullshit this motherfucker. Okay, I'm done. And they just get real quiet in there, or they just leave the room or whatever, right? But if you start to up there, just talking in generalities and stuff, white men will go, just ham on, oh, I think it's about morality, and I think it's about culture, and I think it's about behavior, and blah, 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 right? Just start talking all that dumb shit, right? If you start bringing up money and economics, they got nowhere to go. And you notice because, like, if you go back and you look at, like I said before, white men had to fight for everything they got, right? I mean, again, if it was up to the fat cats on Wall Street, again, they had to create child labor laws. Why should you have to create child labor laws? Why should you have to create a law that says a 12-year-old should be in school as opposed to working in a factory? So that lets you know what the white elites used to think about the poor working class, or what they still think about the poor working class, right? Or poor slash working class. They ain't give a fuck. Okay? They were like, we're gonna work you like dogs. There ain't nothing you can do. No health care, no full medical and dental, no retirement, no 401k, no holidays off, no weekends. Like, back in the day, people were working like 7 days a week. They had to fight for that, fight for the weekends and everything else like that. And if you go and you look at some of these videos, and they got them on YouTube, and you look at the when these union guys are fighting the company for certain things, I mean they almost always, without hesitation, always bring up, we're talking about men with families here, families, because the man was the breadwinner, he was supporting a family. And usually, that would shut a lot of stuff down. We're talking about men with families here, right? Because they know that in order for a man to be the patriarch of his household, in order for a community to be intact, you need to have men working, and you need to have men making enough money to provide for not only themselves, but their family as well. That is a universal concept in the white community. And as a rule, white men don't fuck around when it comes to that concept. But somehow, some way, they try to omit that reality when it comes to black men. And so I'm like, I have to quickly and promptly remind them that it's all about the money. And as soon as I point out it's all about the money, they usually back the fuck off. But if you don't focus on the money, they get, white men get real stupid in the conversation. If it takes you X amount of dollars to support and provide for your family and give them a comfortable lifestyle so that you can set the rule, the tone, and the pace, in your community, and be a respected leader in your community, it's going to take me the same resources to do the same goddamn thing. I get sick and tired of white folks that always try to tell black folks that we should be able to do with $3 what they're doing with $20. Like, fuck out of my face. That bullshit. They love to do that crap. And a lot of black men out here stupidly fall, for that type of nonsense, and they don't call it out when it needs to be called out. Sick of that shit. But my thing is just like with some black people, it's like some black people, I'm like, okay, so what are you really trying to do? Are you trying to get rid of just, this one-sided, white people define everything, and, we're not even able to saber rattle at the negotiating table? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have any issue with ideas that are being presented that are fair. I'm like, okay, that's pretty fair to me. Okay, that's cool. I'm not here to flip society on its head and make it so that the blacks control everything and the white people are the slaves. Like, I'm not even on that shit. I'm on, you know, white people have had control over everything, our lives, how things are defined and everything, and I'm like, that needs to stop. Now, if you want to come to the table and we can work this out, then yeah. But see, the reality is like, when it comes to white folks, like, white folks are not going to negotiate with black people, because you do not negotiate from a position of weakness. And black people are in a position of weakness. So why do white folks need to negotiate with us? They don't need to negotiate with us. Fuck you, nigger, right? But my thing is like, I'd much rather white folks just be honest about, their bigotry or their racism or their desire to control shit, as opposed to piss on me and then telling me that it's fucking rain. I know it's not rain. I know that you want to maintain power. I know that you want to be in control. Don't sit up in here and get in my face and start telling me about, how we're all one and we're all Americans and all that other shit. You know, it's always, anytime black people file a grievance, oh, why don't you go back to Africa, nigger? Why don't you go back to Africa? Right? It's always, why don't you go back to Africa? Funny how, again, when we go off the war and fight the white man's wars, ain't nobody talking about go back to Africa, right? When it comes to niggas having guns, oh, they let us have all the guns we want when we're going out there and fighting the Japanese or the Viet Cong or the Mujahideen, or the ISIS or some shit like that. Oh yeah, nigga, you can have all the guns you want. But then when it comes to protecting ourselves from they asses, oh no, you must have justifiable need and you gotta have a reason to carry that is left up to the discretion of the white police officers at the police station that's 93% Caucasian, and then we decide whether you should have a firearm, right? It's amazing. And the irony is a lot of those laws that were designed to keep guns out of the hands of black folks are now being used by the liberal left to keep guns out of the hands of white folks. You think that justifiable need law was created for black folks? Hell no. White folks, it was created for black folks. Hell no. It's just like the Mulford Act. Why doesn't California have open carry? Because the Black Panthers, who were sick and tired of police brutality, were walking around with guns that they got from the FBI, who used informant Richard Aoki, who committed suicide in 2009 to arm the Black Panthers. But see, they don't tell you that in school. You don't get that in the history books. They don't tell you about that stuff. They don't tell you about the COINTELPRO and the way that the um, federal government undermined the black leaders in the black community. Same black leaders in the black community that white people are running around saying, black people need to show some personal responsibility. When black people were trying to show some personal responsibility and handle their own business and fix their own communities, y'all sent in the assassins. Y'all went off and monitored the black people, and we got to take out Malcolm X. We're going to create create this sort of internal hostility, right? By flaming the fuels by fueling the flames that already exist internally in the organization and creating conflict and deception and everything. Go on Wikipedia and type in COINTELPRO and look at the tenets of COINTELPRO. It says right in there to create all sorts of division and deception and everything else. It says it right in there. So I'm saying, when white people want to jump up and they want to get into denial, oh, what's white privilege, and we don't understand, there's no such thing as white supremacy and all this other stuff. It's in your damn history. It's in your damn hit. Anybody can pull up the files. But now, what do you want to say? When did racism end? When did all the fucking with black people stuff stop in America? In the 80s? In the 90s? In the early 2000s? When did it stop? Tell me when it stopped. I'd like to know the specific date of when all this racism and fucking with black people stopped. Please let me know when it stopped. It's like the people who make those arguments, real talk, they're just sophisticated, closeted racists. That's all they are. They're not going to come out like the Ku Klux Klan and say nigger, nigger, nigger. They're sophisticated, closeted racist. That's what they are. And like Stefan Molyneux, he's a perfect example. Sophisticated, closeted racist. You know, um, among a few others, Colin Flattery, the Think Like a Cop guy, right? Sophisticated, right? Use the symptoms of a problem to say that this is, this is the problem, right? You use that to justify and the mistreatment of black people by focusing on the symptoms of white supremacy and racism and discrimination and marginalization. It's real slick. It's like I was talking about affirmative action with somebody the other day, and they were asking me, well, what do you think, the problems of affirmative action? I'm not gonna lie, I can't take credit for it. I got it from somebody else, but I responded and I said, the problem with the affirmative action, and I never really thought about it this way. But the problem with the affirmative action is what a lot of white folks were doing is it's like this. It's like I'll give you a perfect example. It's like feminism, right? It's like if you really want to shut all these feminists down, open up the doors. Not saying that there's any particular barriers there, but I'm saying open up the doors. Okay, yeah, all right. The feminists are like, yes, and you all deny us access to this, this, and that. And I already know that it's not about women being incapable of doing shit. It's about the fact that women don't want to do certain things, right? But they want to say that there's barriers and blockades preventing them from going into certain fields, and it's bullshit. Because if it literally put a sign in front of a construction company and say looking for female construction workers, now hiring, right? Now hiring, looking for female construction workers. You think you're going to have a whole bunch of women show up? Looking for female crab boat fishers, now hiring. You think a bunch of women are going to show up? Looking for female coal miners, now hiring. You think they're going to show up? They're not going to show up because they don't want to do that type of work. What they're fighting for is the right to do that type of work, or the ability or the freedom or the choice to do that type of work, even though they don't want to do it. What you're going to see is you're going to see women scrambling for leadership positions in white collar jobs in air conditioned spaces that require degrees, right? Which women are already dominating, right? See, they're on some next level shit where now, they're like, well, why can't I be, on the level of the elite white men who have set up the whole structure. And I'm like, good luck with that one. Um, but the reason I'm bringing it up, why was I bringing that point up about the women and open up the doors? Oh, it's like, with black people, it's like, with affirmative action, right? The slick thing to do, and this is what a lot of black people miss about the slick thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, open up the door, let the black guys in. Just because you change policy and you change the laws doesn't mean you change the hearts and minds of men. So you'll have situations where it's like, oh yeah, let the black guy in. We're gonna make sure that we're not gonna like, in other words, we're gonna let the black guy in, but we're not gonna get the guy that we actually think can do the job so that he can actually excel and move up the ranks. No, we're going to get the worst example that we can get, and then we're going to basically straw man that guy and address his failure and utilize his failure to further justify and say, see, that's why the blacks shouldn't be here. It's real slick. It's the same way in debate style where people go out there and they debate somebody who is not their equal. It's like when you see, guys like Nuance Bro who walk around the crowds and he stuffs the microphone in everybody's face and he demonstrates how ignorant everybody is. And I'm like, it's like, oh, look, this is how the people on the left think, right? As opposed to actually going out there and debating somebody who's on the left, and he claims that he's neutral, but obviously he's right of center. Um, I'll give him that much, but I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that there aren't videos that he's done that I agree with, that I don't agree with. He has videos that I do agree with. However, it's him, Matt Lauer, what's his name? Louder Crowder, is that his name? Matt Louder? I forget his name. But anyway, same thing. You go around with the microphone. He's a little better because he actually creates the kiosk. I'll give him more credit because he actually creates the kiosk and says basically anybody can get in line and debate me. So that's just completely random, and that actually takes more skill to do than somebody who edits a video together and literally goes around, asking people, putting the mic in their face, and they get to edit the video later, of who they want to debate. The truth be told, the true intellectuals are not going to be walking around in a protest. Those are people who are flying off with emotion and probably haven't even investigated what they're even protesting. And you'll hear dumbass arguments on both sides. I mean, like, even when you talk about the Second Amendment, I can't stand the people that are like, it's our God-given right. I'm like, that's the best answer that you have for why the Second Amendment is important. Really, dude? Really? It's our God-given from my cold dead hands. 1776 will be upon you if you try to take away my guns. I'm like, that's the best answer that you have. And so, like, a lot of those people are just as bad as the people that are like, we're going to take away all the guns so that the criminals won't have them. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So, like, truth be told, most people are not that sharp. Most people are not that bright. And you're not going to have a true intellectual conversation when it comes to that. To give another example, I have a colleague of mine, who, had to go through an apprenticeship and everything else. And they talked about a lot of the racist practices in cities like New York, where, black guys would try to become a part of these unions, carpenters unions, and things like that. Like, it's one of the things that people don't know about Bill Cosby. They want to talk about, oh, Bill Cosby, he's a molester and all this other stuff. Bill Cosby, obviously when he was doing the Cosby Show and had the sets and everything, he noticed that all of the, stage hands, were white guys, the film crew, camera guys, all that stuff. And he asked the question, why are there no black guys, on here? And they gave him, some bullshit answer or whatever. And he's like, I want to see some black guys, on, here. If we're doing the show and everybody's making money off of me and doing this, I want to see some black guys, doing this. So he literally paid, I think it was like $3,000 per person, and I forget how many black men he got. I'm pretty sure it's several hundred, if I'm not mistaken, that he paid for so that they could go through and get their apprenticeships, so that they could, basically do the same thing the white guys were doing with the same skills and make the same type of money. Okay? And see, this is what it really comes down to when you want to talk about, racism, like real racism, effective racism, right? I hate when white people say, "Oh, black people can be racist too." Bullshit. Black people, even if you want to argue that black people can be racist, black people's racism is not effective, even though I don't even like the term, because racism is about having power. And one of the things that black people don't have is power, because they don't control the economic landscape. They don't control the jobs. They don't control the opportunities. They don't control the banking system. They don't control the educational system. So when white people jump up and they're like, oh, well, black people are there, so they're racist, just because some black person jumped up and said, I don't like white people. And if a white person said the same thing, you'd say it's racist. When white people don't just make a statement and that's the end of it. White people can literally shut black people out of their livelihood, their ability to survive. Black people can't shut white people at the collective level out of shit. So when white people jump up and they say these things, I'm like, again, more intellectual dishonesty. It's irritating as fuck. But anyway, getting back to the sort of apprenticeships, one of the things that was going on, like in the '60s and whatnot, is you would have black guys and had all this affirmative action. Okay, we want to see more black guys and stuff like that. And like I said, not only would they, you know, push the incompetent people through so that they would fuck up later because they were incompetent and they weren't qualified, and then they could say, well, see, look, this is what the black guys do. We told you not to let them in here, right? Not only would they do that, but they would also, sign off on the black guy's apprenticeship without him doing anything. You see this even on construction sites now, where they get the black guy, yeah, you hold the sign. Since you gotta be here, since they forced you upon us, you just hold the sign. He's never the one using the bulldozer. And I'm not saying that's everywhere all the time, 100% of the time. Because I've definitely seen black guys have different jobs on construction sites. But we all know that there's a long legacy and a long history of, yeah, you hold the sign. I mean, it's like on one half, you say to yourself, oh, well, that's the black guy's got it easy, right? He's got it easy. All he's got to do is hold the sign. He's making the same wages as all these other white guys, right? That are doing all the hard work. The problem is when he's just holding that sign, he's not gaining or acquiring any skills that he can then take and pass on to his son or pass on to another black man so that they have the skills and so that they can move around the marketplace and utilize or use their skills or sell their skills, for, labor in exchange for obviously money and resources, right? That's the game. And again, a lot of white folks are intellectually dishonest about, especially white men specifically, are dishonest about that. And then want to act like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. This is the type of shit that goes on. And any white man that's honest about, just the conversation about race and money and, all this, why there's so many issues, okay? Y'all seen it. White men have seen it. You sit there and you say in the back of your mind, oh man, that's fucked up. But you ain't about to open your mouth and go against your other brethren, you know, and blow the whistle or anything else because you getting paid. You got a family to support. Even if you're not a racist white man, you're not going to go up against the collective. That's why I use the term collective. Because it's not about every white man being racist. It's about the system of white supremacy that you ain't about to go up against because, again, you got a family to support. And I don't knock you for, supporting your family. I'm not saying that, no, you should go in there as a white guy and tell all the other white guys off because then you'll be out of a job. But I'm just saying when you know that shit like that is going on, don't come around me talking about you don't know what the fuck is going on. Fuck out my face with that bullshit. You know exactly what the fuck is going on. So what else is there? And then there's like it's like okay. Um it's like you ever see the movie Crash, right? Cuz this is a point that has to be brought up cuz this goes back to the whole money thing, right? In the movie Crash, if you haven't seen Crash, there's a scene where there's a white cop. He pulls over Terrence Howard and Thandie Newton, and they were basically, he's a film producer, and they're rich and making money and everything, living the good life. Two light skinned black people, and the cop, he's feeling some type of way because he got into it with a black nurse, and his dad has BPH, which is benign prostate hyperplasia, which his dad was having issues urinating, right? Because the prostate enlarges, wraps around the urethra and basically pinches it off and makes it difficult to urinate. And typically all men when they get to the age of about 70 or 80, they have prostate issues, right? So he had got into it with the black woman, and the whole movie Crash is about running around spilling these interactions onto other people and how everybody else is affected. It's almost like the opposite of that Coca-Cola commercial where it's like you do one nice deed and then it spills into something else, and then somebody else does a nice deed for somebody else because somebody did something nice for them, right? So that's literally the whole theme of the movie Crash. And basically he pulls them over, you know, and there's a lot of stuff going on in that scene. There's a lot of issues that aside from the racist cop, the other issues of where Terrence Howard tells her to be quiet and stay in the car. What does she do? She gets out the car. It's like, oh, here we go with the issue of black women not listening, right? But see, that not listening to black men goes back to black men's inability to be patriarchs for their community, for their inability to provide economic opportunities for themselves, let alone their women and children who are not dependent on them for their economic survival, unlike white men who have white women and white children who are dependent on them for their economic survival at the collective level. So if a black man can't get a job, if he's not working, if he's unemployed or underemployed, then he can't be the patriarch of his family nor the patriarch of his community, in collective efforts with other patriarchal men of his community. And so, a lot of times when I see this sort of crime spill out of the black community and spill into the white community and some white person gets killed or robbed or whatever, I don't shed a tear. And I've said that before, because it's just like the movie Crash. It's like nobody gives a fuck, and oh yeah, that's their problems. We don't give a shit, right? And again, the system of white supremacy, racism, marginalization, discrimination, and everything else. They think those problems are just going to stay in the ghetto, or stay over there. And so while those people are suffering over there, then when you end up with, the son joining a gang and then it spills out of the black community and spills into the white community, and then, some white girl ends up dead because she got carjacked by the black kid that was, um, you know, joining a gang because, he's living in poverty because his dad is not gainfully employed. The only response that white people have is personal responsibility. They don't want to make all the connections, right? It's just like that movie. I think there was a movie by James Earl Jones where he was like a pastor in South Africa, and his son ended up robbing a white man's son and killing him, and then at the end of the movie, they were like sending letters to each other, and at the end of the movie, the black son, James Earl Jones' son, was executed. He was executed for the crime of murdering the white man that he had killed. And the whole concept of the movie was, basically, the whole degrees of separation. The fact that the whole system of South Africa and how it was set up to benefit the white folks just culminated to create this situation where James Earl Jones, son would, have to resort to a life of crime. And that's what he did. And again, for some reason, when it comes to black folks, all these, you know, societal, what do you want to call them? You know, you know, circumstances that culminate to create situations that where people are, having to make decisions about survival, because as I've stated before, um, you know, um, assimilation does not, what is it? Survival does not wait for assimilation. And it's not about whether something is right or wrong. If you have to survive, it is what it is. It's just the same way as, um, white people essentially conquering the world. It doesn't matter. People can joke, oh, it was evil and what they did was evil and all that other stuff. The only reason people are saying that is because white people were running around the world throwing Bibles all over the place. Take away them throwing Bibles all over the place. If they were to say, yeah, fuck you, we took it, we won, and that's the end of it, you got nothing. You got nothing. There's no moral aspect of it. They won, they defeated everybody, they survived, their genes are being passed on, and that is the end of it. Right? This is why I try to tell black people, if black people were less religious, we would be better off. Because survival is in direct conflict with morality. I know people who want to think that, well, they can exist in the same space, but they really can't. I'm saying for white people, it doesn't exist in the same space. Their morality only extends to them. Their morality does not extend to anybody else. They telling black people, oh, go over there and turn the other cheek. Meanwhile, when they talk to themselves, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. It's a double standard. And black people subscribe to this. And we lose as a result of this. How are you going to let the very group of people who conquered your ass define your morality for you? Even white people are listening to this, saying to themselves, the nigger's got a point. He's got a point. But see, they already know this. They're not stupid. Us, on the other hand, we're stupid. We allow our oppressors to define our morality for us, to determine, what is righteous and what is not, which will always have us in a compromising, or excuse me, a compromised position. It's the same thing that I said when I talked about that white guy that I got into an argument with and said, what my father said? The problem with the black community is black people don't take care of themselves, right? And I was like, you're right. Black people don't take care of that. I acknowledged everything he said. I said, you're right. We suck at that. We should do better and focus on ourselves and fix our own community. And he was like, that's right. You need to fix yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, what the goal here that white people do here is they want you to fix your own problems that they created because they don't want fixing the problem to cost them anything. Right? Whether it was their ancestors, the transgressions of their ancestors, doesn't matter. It shouldn't cost me anything. Okay, so whatever you got to do to get it in your mind that you need to fix your own problem, you need to do that. Problem is, anytime black people do that, that's when white people come in and they got a problem with the fact that they're being excluded now. Even though they focus on themselves and they say it's all about each community's own personal responsibility. As soon as black people focus on themselves, reverse racism. This is why I don't like for black people to jump up and tell white people that, you know, drink the Kool-Aid of all that, equality and racial harmony and all that other stuff. And, you're being racist and wagging their fingers at white people. I'm like, no, they're taking care of their own community. They're doing what they're supposed to do. Leave them alone. And the reason I say that is because when we go off and we go and form our own community and do our own thing, I don't want them jumping up saying reverse racism. And then you get the people who jump up and say, well, I think the best idea is for black people and white people to go into their respective corners. And I wouldn't have a problem with that per se. However, the issue is the fact that you got all the resources. And you got all the resources from unfair and unjust means. So I'm like, nah, we ain't gonna do that either. Yeah, it's easy to say everybody just needs to go to their respective corners when you're sitting there with a cart full of goodies, that you took from everybody else. Oh yeah, it's easy to say that shit. You know. Oh, why don't everybody just go to their respective corners and we just call it even? Right? So um it's what was I saying? I forget where I was going with that. Um but I mean you get black people who I can't tell whether they just want to challenge the system of white supremacy so that white people don't dominate every aspect of our lives, you know, financially, socially, mentally, right? Because we got black people that got a whole bunch of self-hate because of colorism and white images of they are the standard. They're the standard for male handsomeness. They're the standard for female beauty, right? That negatively affects black people. That's why, Black Panther was such an important movie to black people. First time you ever see black people in a movie in a positive light, without there being, just bombarded with white standards of beauty and bombarded with, white standards of everything. That's why it was important to black people. Hell, that movie made me cry. It made me cry because I'm like, it's fantasy. At the end of the day, there is no place like that for black people that actually exists. Meanwhile, white people can draw on multiple, places and things and say, we're awesome, right? Builds your self-esteem up, right? Look at Europe, look at Sweden, look at Germany, right? They go, and I'm not going to take away white people's initiative and their ability to, just keep striving and move forward, you know. But again, when you look at history, it has been at the expense of non-white peoples. There are no resources in Europe, or there's only a handful. Norway's got some oil, but you know, the industrialization of Europe could not have happened without Europeans leaving Europe and going elsewhere in the world to basically gather an infinite amount of resources to, move their civilization forward. Their civilization moving forward did not come uh, without being at the expense of non-white peoples. That is a fact. You know. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying about some of the black people that I take issue with, it's like, okay, I get you that you don't want white people to control every aspect of your life, but the problem that I have is where they act like if it was a black controlled society that there wouldn't be any standards, rules, or regulations. This is where you get into the black anarchist that hide behind we're just here to defeat white supremacy. And I'm like, even in Wakanda, there was rules and regulations and standards and whatnot. So, and there's a lot of black folks, they hide behind that. They hide behind well, white people define everything. And if we was by ourselves, left to our own devices, you know, it would be like they literally want to go back to like 5000 BC and shit, where the men are, fishing in the river, and then, they come back to the village, and the women, at dusk, they come back to the village with baskets of berries over their heads, and the children are playing around the bonfire, and where there's a big feast, right? And then there's the high priestess, and she comes out and gives a blessing, and then you know we go back, and the men and the women go and fuck and make more babies in the freaking goat skin tent that they're living in, or straw hut that they're living in. And then this just indefinitely goes on for millennia upon millennia, right? And they want to have these sort of agrarian lifestyles. And I'm like, that shit is not motherfucking appealing to me. Like, get out of my face with that bullshit. I am a modern man living in modern society. I get you on the whole, black people should be able to control their own destiny. I'm with you 100% all day, right? And white people, they want to act like, oh, how dare black people say that? Fuck you. You know what I'm saying? Because y'all most certainly ain't about to let anybody else control your destiny, but I'm supposed to be comfortable with you controlling mine. Fuck you again. So um, those black people I got a problem with, and I can't really determine and tell who is who. Who's like a black Antifa, an anarchist, and who's a black person that's like, I'm sick of being subject to white people's fuckery and bullshit. So that's something that has to be sorted out among black people. But we definitely got issues, among our ranks in terms of that being a problem just as much as white people do. There's white people who don't like the white system. I mean, there's white people who hate, the whole structure of capitalism and everything else. There's enough articles that have been written about white people who don't like it, and they want to go off and, go into the Himalayas and meditate in some Tibetan temple. I want the knife, please. They want to do, the golden child type of thing, or do like, John Lennon and, convert to Hinduism, and, you know, or find some guru in India and bathe in the Ganges River. Like there's a lot of weird ass white people, that are anti the system, like that. And then you got the people who they're only anti the system because they can't function within it. And for black people, since black people are discriminated and denied and kept out because again, it is about a fight for resources and jobs and opportunities, and there's only a limited amount of you're going to have more black people who are going to be anti the system than white people who are anti the system because there's more white people who have access as members of the dominant society to certain jobs and opportunities. Now in my opinion, I think that's changing, and that's why I think a lot of the powers that be want to take people's guns away, because America has been deindustrialized. The markets have changed. Those poor working class white men who had coal mines and factories and shipyards and things like that, they don't have that anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, there's been times in this country where like white unemployment was virtually non-existent. Now, if you don't have a college degree, if you don't know how to do things on the computer, like you're SOL, straight up. So, what do you do with all those people? What do you do with all those people that are only, that not even the fact that they're, semi-skilled or no skilled, but the fact that they really only have the intellectual capacity to be semi-skilled or no skilled. What do you do with those people? And Jordan, I think his name is Jordan Peterson. Is that his name, Jordan Peterson? He asked that very question. Now he's an asshole sometimes and an intellectual elitist, but I'm saying he asked that very question. What do you do with all these people? Now, my concern, again, with, black people, disproportionately being subjected to the conditions that they've been subject to over those several hundred years, that puts us, as the ones to be first to be eradicated or first to be cast aside or first to be shunned, right? Or first to be eliminated, right? Because, we have a very large population of people that essentially were never meant to be incorporated into American society. They were never meant to be incorporated. We are an inconvenient population. We are inconvenient immigrant population that is the only immigrant population that can't be deported, unlike other groups. Right? We've been here just as long as white people was. What the first African come to America in 1607 or something like that in Virginia, right? So, and it's 2018, right? So, we've been here just as long, but we were never meant to be incorporated into the society as equals. And we still haven't achieved that goal. And, I don't know if that goal can be achieved at this point. I knew Donald Trump was going to get elected. And Donald Trump's election is a combination of multiple things: fear of white people losing power, fear of, the changing demographics of America, not just based on black people. I mean, Hispanics, they having kids like rabbits, you have, um, uh, Asians, who are, obtaining, professional degrees at an astronomical rate. Again, I implore you to go read the article, Ghost of White People Past, which is about white people fleeing the Asian ethnoburbs because they feel that their kids can't compete with, the Asians who are scoring high on, entrance exams and stuff like that. So they feel some type of way. Oh man, it's I mean it's the America is changing, and that unnerves a lot of white folks. Aside from the white folks that have essentially been abandoned by the white elite, which are those poor working class white folks who, you know, have suffered the largest, some of the largest losses in terms of the deindustrialization of America. Who weren't able to adapt or who weren't able to move or relocate out of Appalachia, or out of the Rust Belt, you know. And then, with black people, I mean, we just totally got fucked. You move out of the South to move to the North to get away from sharecropping. You get into those factories, and then, by, the 70s and the 80s, all those factories are closing their doors. And white men are scrambling to try to figure out ways to, squeeze, every ounce of money that they can, out of, the companies and the jobs and the opportunities until they aren't anymore. But, by the time the door closed on the last white man, black men had been out of work for decades. As we like to say, last to get hired, first to get fired. So that's pretty much all I got to say about this video. You know, I definitely understand why you have black people who are just, they're just fed up. Like I said before, eventually people get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And America is not a healthy environment for black people. It really isn't. It's not a healthy environment. I mean, physically, it's not healthy. In terms of just the stress. And the from all the gaslighting that white people do. All the intellectual dishonesty. That having these type of conversations is exhausting. And then it's mentally exhausting. Just from the just the context of the history. White people don't have to teach their kids that, hey, back in the day, we were slaves. The closest people that have to do that are like Jewish people. They say, hey, back in the day, they tried to stick us in ovens and eradicate us. Right. But I'm saying they actually formed a nation with the assistance of the United States and Great Britain. Right. They took the land from the Palestinians, but they actually formed a nation. They actually have a space for themselves. Right. But, with black people, um, that's there's no safe space. And I mean, an interesting some interesting things to look up, even for African Americans, is Liberia. Because Liberia was a colony, basically a place that was used to, send some African slaves back to. But guess what happened in Liberia? Guess who were the ruling class in Liberia? The descendants of the African American slave population, right? So they've gone there and created a stratification on their own. Why? Because they have their they came back there, they were educated, they were when I say educated, I mean aware of what's going on in the world, and what else is out there and whatnot. I mean, it's a different perspective, but they ended up coming there and dominating the people who were there. Which goes to show you how some of this is just tribalism, and the behavior of people when they are in a particular position of an advantage. They're going to take that advantage. I don't expect anybody not to take an advantage. I'm just saying, don't blow smoke up my ass and tell me that it isn't what it is. It's I know what the hell it is, and I see what it is, and I'd much rather exist in a world where I know what it is. I don't like to exist with any illusions or delusions about how the world actually operates. I mean, all like I said, all you got to do is read through. I think his name is Ralph Emerson or Epperson or something like that. The Unseen Hand. All you got to do is read through the Unseen Hand once, and you're pretty much up to speed on how things are really played. you know but anyway, um that's pretty much all I gotta say. So that is my video. I'm gonna put this video underneath the New Jersey gun laws channels, since I might share it on my other channels, because I definitely think this is something that a lot of black people need to hear, because I don't think people get this perspective. I don't, you know, from even other black people. But anyway, that's my video. I'm out.